Hey guys, welcome back to another live stream. Purple Political Talk here. Today is Tuesday, August 10th, 2021, and it's been a not only crazy and ridiculous day in US politics, we had many different updates. It's just been a crazy week since we last talked and discussed. I'm going to start by opening up the chat. And I see that there is a lot of people around here. So we have my Pampro, Carol, Brick, Progressive Rising, Siltmore, Neptune, Rich, all around here today. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And today we have a lot of things to talk about. And I would say starting off with the Andrew Cuomo situation, I think it's one of the most, breaking stories we've seen, a complete 180, a fall from grace, if you will, from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who, he at first was, a political figure who was a big leader, was someone who was popular. He had this position in the US government and amongst the Democratic Party. It was going to be pretty easy for him moving forward. However, last minute sexual assault, or not last minute because they've happened a long time ago, but those allegations surfacing are going to have very big long-term impacts at that for New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. So I think that is truly one of the biggest stories of today. I personally, my reaction is I was shocked. I mean, I don't think I wasn't expecting that from Andrew Cuomo. Just the way that he's been handling the situation and such, I did not see that coming. However, at the end of the day, it ended up happening. In other news, we're also seeing pretty bad approval ratings on Joe Biden's part, where we have, his approval ratings nearing 50%. I would not be surprised that if within the next month or two we see, negative approval ratings for Joe Biden or under 50% for that. So there is a lot of things going on politically, and I want to see what you guys have to say down in the chat, and we can have, the discussion that we have every single week. So let me open up the chat and let's start discussing. So, Progressive Rising, I agree with you here. The sexual assault situation was the last haul the last straw for Andrew Cuomo. I think that Andrew Cuomo has had a lot of different challenges over the last year. Nursing homes was a very big one, for Andrew Cuomo, and I think unfortunately for him, he's had quite a trouble recovering for that. He has not been able to fully recover. Why might be the question, because ultimately one of the big things that we're seeing is that he's at all these things and they come up and up again and they're repeating themselves, and I think it's going to be something that in the long term is going to be difficult, for many politicians that might have things like that, behind the scenes. The sexual assault allegations, if you get with those allegations, it's going to be a lot harder for you to survive. So Bobby Hawthorne asked who the lieutenant governor is. So the lieutenant governor of the state of New York is Katie Hochul, who she was a former representative. She was a former, city councilwoman, but I think most importantly, she has, the experience, right, from being the lieutenant governor over these last years of Cuomo. Now, there's a lot of things that politically won't fundamentally change. I think we're just seeing a new person. I mean, if you're hoping that they would get a investigation, I guess, if we're talking about the nursing home scandal or even a further investigation into Andrew Cuomo, you're not going to get that from her. She is pretty much Cuomo's successful politically. She doesn't have political baggage, so that's what we're seeing with Cuomo. Progressive Rising says he already had scandals, but they keep under the rug, and I think that's something that happens to every politician. And I think Andrew Cuomo, had that. It's just that this was last straw, and truly it was what really caught him. Let's see. I still do think that Raphael Warnock wins against anyone. At this point, unless some really, really strong Republican candidate that can absolutely take the Atlanta suburbs by storm and win them by a couple points. They run the Republicans run it. So I do think that Raphael Warnock will still hold on. I think that the Democrats have built so much support in Georgia to the point where it's going to be pretty easy for them to be able to win. Let's see. Do I think that Kamala Harris will be president by 2022? I do not think so right now. This is another thing I wanted to talk about today, and I think it's Joe Biden. Like over the last week, I think that we've kind of seen like he's not at the same fitness level he was during the campaign, even. And it's worrying. And I do think that there may be signs that Joe Biden may resign for the presidency before 2024. I do think 2022 is a little bit of a stretch. I think the Democrats, they need Joe Biden in the White House for the midterms. There's no way around it because I know for sure if Biden resigns or leaves office before the midterms, you can consider Democrats done. Biden is going to be last saving grace for the Democrats in the midterms as it looks right now. And again, we're still far out. We do not know what's going to happen. It's looking like it's going to be a very tough year for the Democrats in 2022. So I do think that in many ways, you're going to end up seeing that need for Joe Biden to be in the White House. 2024 Texas Senate, Cruz versus Beto O'Rourke. So pretty much a rematch. I think that race is going to be interesting if that does end up happening. There's many different things that could happen in that race. I do think that where the country would be, I would expect the Republicans to be in a slightly stronger status, although Ted Cruz is unpopular. I think given Beto O'Rourke's possibilities and how he got close, it's a winnable race. However, I think the only thing that might get Beto O'Rourke the loss, I guess, there is mostly nationwide party environment. Will Biden ratings rise a little because of his infrastructure bill? So I personally do think that they might go up narrowly. I don't think it's going to have this big impact. I think that, first of all, it's a little bit too late for the big bill, but regardless, it's a good thing for the administration. It's going to be something you can present in the midterms. As far as approval ratings, though, I do think they might rise 1 or 2%. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Again, this was something that's been in the works for years of years. They're finally getting it through, and I think that it's something that could help out Biden, but not really by that much. Do you think that Arizona or Georgia will return back to the GOP in 2024? I think that those are two states that have the possibility of turning back to the GOP in 2024. I don't think it's a given, or it's like definitely not, but I do think there's a possibility. I know for a fact that 100% if Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee for president, you can say Arizona is gone. I think she could still have a chance to win Georgia, but again, Georgia went very narrowly to Joe Biden, and I think a lot of people over-exaggerate. People think, oh, they went to Joe Biden. It's in the same way that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan went to Donald Trump in 2024. It was very narrowly. So them losing it is not out of the question. And I think that's also when you see, the Republicans lost, in the Midwest in 2020. It's not out of the question. If Doug Collins did not resign, he would have a shot. Yeah, I think I agree with that. If he would have not run for Senate in 2022, if he didn't even lose the primary, because that was a primary that was, surprised that Doug Collins lost. But if he just stayed in the House and ran as, a different candidate, like a new candidate, I think he could have, gotten a better chance of winning. Let's see. Do you think Kamala Harris will ever be president? The only way I think Kamala Harris is going to be president if it's Joe Biden's unfit to be in office, and for some reason, whether it's via impeachment, via health reason, him basically resigning, I think that's the only way Kamala Harris will be president. I do not think Kamala Harris has the likability nor charisma to end up winning a presidential race at the national level, even with as many surrogates as she wants, as many different things. I do not think she could be she's not a good presidential candidate at all. We saw Democratic voters reject her back in 2020, and I think they will reject her again in the primary and in the national race. So at this point, that's a marginal maybe, but depending on the situation. 2026 governor election, Florida, Nikki Fried against Byron Donalds. So I think that's an interesting race. Nikki Fried, I think she has certain types of appeal. I don't think that, again, these two candidates I think are a little bit, more broad when you talk about Florida statewide. Nikki Fried won a statewide election, but it's a race that you don't hear about. It's an agriculture race. And Byron Donalds is just a representative. I think that there's other candidates in Florida that could end up running in 2026. I would say mainly probably someone like Janet Nunez, current lieutenant governor. You could see someone like, Manny Diaz Jr. for the Republicans. You could see other people like Maria Elvira Salazar. I would love if she ran for Congress. But for the Democrats, I think there's also other options like Ana Escamani, a state representative. Nikki Fried is probably the more viable, well-known option. And this is, Charlie Crist. He can't run again. So I think it would actually be interesting. Byron Donalds, I think, would actually end up winning that race. Nikki Fried, if she continues to being as tight with the Democratic administration, I think she could have a little bit of trouble in Florida. I'm not trusting the polls that are bad for DeSantis. He's very popular. I do agree with that. That I think that a lot of the polls are trying to do the same thing they kind of did to Trump with the underestimating of DeSantis. And I think when we talk about polls, I think we do have to talk about the little factor that, that the Democratic Party is somehow, not themselves directly, but the people running these polls have some biases in certain ways, or just some misrepresentations in the data, I guess. So I think that these polls have DeSantis down. I think it comes down to many different things. I think that number one, it's a lot of, trying to get DeSantis down. From governor, I mean, you've seen Charlie Crist. He's building a campaign. He's doing all of this. I mean, the Democratic Party in Florida is in really big disarray right now. They're going to try to do their best. I think that generally DeSantis is popular, but there's definitely going to be some approval downfalls for him, mostly with COVID. If he cannot get COVID under handling, I don't think he will lose a race, but he will lose some support against suburban voters. Her best chance is if Biden resigns and give her a year or so in the White House so she can run for re-election on that 1-year track record. I do think that's a possibility for Harris. However, I do think that could also cause her more problems. If, one of the things I realized about Kamala Harris is that, politically, she's not as good of a candidate. I think she has a lot of political troubles when it comes to actually running the race correctly, doing things that are going to be politically popular. I think that's one of her big issues as a candidate. And I think in the White House, if she's the lead, I think it's going to be even worse for her. Just as vice president, it would be a completely different story if Kamala Harris was being a approved vice president, very popular vice president, but she's far from that right now. So I do think that even with that, she would still lose. Who's the worst candidate the Florida Democrats can nominate for governor in 2022? So out of the declared ones, I would say Nikki Fried. I think that Charlie Crist has a better chance of winning over those suburban voters in Duval, in Hillsborough, and Pinellas counties. I do think that if, they ran Charlie Crist, they would have a better chance because Nikki Fried, she has, kind of weird type of appeal, and I think that she's not a strong candidate. Of someone that's not running, I think the worst candidate they can run is, again, pretty, I guess, semi to high profile, state representative, Ana Escamani, who's, rumored to run. She's very liberal. She's, Bernie's side of the party in the Democrats. And I think that's the worst candidate they could run if they really wanted, to get destroyed in Miami-Dade, get destroyed in Pinellas, get destroyed in Duval. That's who they should have run. Do you think Ron DeSantis will run in 2024? I do think that he runs, with the only caveat being if Donald Trump doesn't run. And I think at this point, the Republicans, they're probably not going to run Trump, mostly because of the big, thing that's social media. They can't run Trump because Trump doesn't have social media. I think that's going to be the big and hardest thing, moving forward for the Republican Party in choosing a candidate. I think if they run DeSantis, I think that would be their best choice. And I think at this point, running Trump Trump's era has passed. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about today, that, I personally feel like Trump is, kind of out of the political mainstream. We haven't heard from him in a while. Not because he doesn't want to, put himself out there. It's just that he can't because of all the, social media bans and everything. But I think that politically it's going to have serious long-term implications. Let's see. Who's the GOP worst possible candidate in 2024? So I do think that, of course, other than your joke candidates like Mitch McConnell, if you would per se, for example, I think that out of the real candidates, the real possibilities, I think a Ted Cruz would be pretty bad candidate. I think that in general, the ones that are almost rumored to run, all of them are strong candidates compared to someone like Kamala Harris, who's likely to win the nomination. So I do think that that's a possibility. I think Ted Cruz could probably be one of the worst candidates. Again, and I also think that he's going to carry a lot of baggage from January 6th. The Democrats need to get rid of Schumer and Pelosi, and Republicans need to get rid of McConnell. This is exactly what I think needs to happen. I'm gonna show you something that I think is pretty interesting. If you notice, the Republicans in the House have had a lot of an easier time conducting business, getting more candidates, and building up the charisma amongst their leadership, because the leadership in the Republicans in the House is a lot younger. If you notice, McCarthy is young. A lot of the committee chairs are younger. If you take a look at the leadership in the Democratic Party in the House and Congress, all of them are old. All of them are bureaucrats that have been there for 15 million years, who do not care about the country. And I would say the same thing with the Senate leadership. With the Senate leadership in the Democrats, it's mostly just Schumer, and for McConnell, it's a lot more people. But I think that generally speaking, there needs to be, a little bit more of a restructuring Congress. And I do think that something should be kind of set up where congressional leadership, you can only be there 4-year term on as committee chair or something. So you're not sitting there for 15 million years. I think that, Congress needs to refresh itself, because if not, what do you think is going to end up happening? Congress is going to, stay stuck, not do anything, because they think a lot of these bureaucrats, they just rather stay in power, gain a lot of these big interest donors, and just say, screw it, I'm not going to do anything. Sit down, negotiate, do nothing politics. Who do I think will be the Republican nominee, Trump or DeSantis? I do think that if Trump runs, he could win the Republican nomination. If it were up to me, if I had a vote in this primary, I would definitely vote for DeSantis. Because if I was a Republican, I would say that, DeSantis has the best possibility of winning in the race. And second, I think that Trump another term in the White House might not be such a smart idea. Let's see. 2030 election, Lena Hagalder versus Will Hillary. That would be a very interesting race. I'm not exactly sure who would win, because the demographics in Texas would switch a lot. DeSantis is literally Trump, but without the bad parts. I agree with that. I think that with the thing that we see with DeSantis is we see the popular Trump ideas. We see Trump economics, the freedom, back the blue type policies that are popular amongst a lot of Americans, especially independents, who are the key to the White House. Now, one of the things that we saw with Trump was all the political baggage. And I think it's just that Trump really rubbed people the bad way. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was in a period in the country where, a lot of people had a bunch of trust in the mainstream media. And I think even amongst Democrats, even amongst independents, even amongst Republicans, there's been a complete loss of trust with the mainstream media. Look at their ratings, they're down. Look at, I think that people do not trust them anymore. And it's alternate forms of media. You take a look at, I'm going to give you an example. This is a podcast recommendation. I've said this a million times. If you're not watching them, I don't know what you guys are doing. But Breaking Points by Crystal and Sagar. It's a very good show because it's real facts. It's news. It's real facts. It's not this mainstream media, the BS that they're treating. And I think that's one of the big things that really hurt Trump in the long term was that, the media clearly cut and clipped, so many clips. But at the end of the day, we didn't know about it. So his image was tarnished for a long time. How much will Ron DeSantis win re-election by? So I think that DeSantis probably wins re-election by somewhere around 4 to 6 points, right? That's my general ballpark area. That's assuming that COVID disappears, or it goes down in Florida. He continues to, implement popular policies and things like that. If COVID is back and rising like it is now, if, it's not the best situation, I still do think he wins re-election, but closer to the 2 to 3% margin. Do I think... Ooh, I lost the comment. Here it is. Do I think that Ron DeSantis is a new Ronald Reagan? I mean, Ronald Reagan is a different type of conservative than Ron DeSantis. I think that, in a way he kind of is, but in many ways he's not. I think that Ronald Reagan was able to do something that many presidents of the past have not been able to do. They've been able to pretty much run the nation that was pretty much united and completely throw it in disarray afterwards because a lot of the policies. I think that Ronald Reagan was a great president. He did great things for the economy. And I think that with the current populism brand that's building amongst some Republican Party, I think that kind of replicates Reagan's trickle-down economics. But I do think that in many different ways, Ronald Reagan is a little bit different. When is Georgia gone for the GOP? I think that GOP has not lost Georgia completely. I think it's more of a question of it developing narrowly. I think by 2032, you could see Georgia pretty much solidified in the Democratic column. Do I think that Ron DeSantis will pick Garcia or Noam for his running mate in 2024? I do think he would definitely pick Kristi Noem. I think she's just more likable candidate. Kind of take care of another part of the country where he's not so familiar with. I think that's somewhere where he could, take some support. There is a big generation gap in the Democratic Party where older politicians are moderates and younger ones are progressive. Of course, this is something that's been happening. And, ironically enough, one of the older politicians, Bernie Sanders, is one of the most progressive, but that's besides the point. I just think that it's come to the point where the old Democrats are the ones that are taking in party interest, and I think, or big donor interest. And I think moving forward, it's going to be very tough for these big interest groups to get into Capitol Hill. And why is it that they're still able to have so much control? And why is it that you can say, oh, some of these insane policies that are popular, they're getting through? It's because these people who are pretty much, big party donors, lobbyists and things like that, they can only get with the old people because they're the only ones that actually let them in. And I think that moving forward, I would say in the next 20 to 30 years, big business in the United States is going to have less control over government because of younger. And I think this also applies to a lot of Republicans as well. Pelosi and Schumer cannot find young people to fill their seats. And I think that's going to be a huge problem for them. I think that, for example, Georgia Senate race is a great example of that. If you run older people compared to younger people, like John Ossoff is the exceptional Senate candidate, for example. He's young, he's charismatic, he can get in the Senate. Give you another example. I think this would be the best pick to run in Pennsylvania. Connor Lamb. I think that compared to John Fetterman, I think that Connor Lamb is a million times better. More younger, more charismatic, can win in swing districts. So, I think that it's also a thing of finding the right candidates, and the Republicans have been able to do that. Is DeSantis different than Trump on anything policy-wise? Well, technically speaking, I would say that he's a little better than Trump when you start talking about COVID policy. I think that and different. I think that his view on COVID is more it's a different type of view. I think it's pretty straightforward to the facts that, okay, we're gonna follow the science until it becomes, a thing against freedom. Similar to Trump, but I think COVID is the biggest thing that's, different for Trump. Do I think Elise Stefanik will become the next Speaker of the House? No, I do not think she will be the next Speaker of the House. Who would I support in a Trump versus Biden rematch? I would honestly support a Trump in this matchup. The only reason being is that I think that Trump did a lot more as president and was able to get a lot more through Congress. And I think he just took a little bit more initiative than Biden as president. And I think that, we heard a lot of noise from Trump that, these different things, that big things that just came up in the media. Again, I think that he really didn't do anything that bad to the country. And I think that we're probably going to end up with, I think, a worse scenario, how I look at it now with Trump. You agree with Soapmore that once the older Democrats politicians leave, the Democrats will be more progressive. Of course, when you get these Democrats who are more progressive in committee chairs, policies are going to be easier to get through. I think it's just a no-brainer. Do I think there's going to be a recession? I 100% there's going to be a recession. And I think people should be thinking smartly right now with their financial decisions. And I think the recession is going to be mostly because of two reasons. Huge spending and pretty much no way of getting it back. What am I saying here? Well, I think that one of the big mistakes that Biden administration is making is extending, the eviction moratorium, is, still having insane amount of unemployment benefits, right? Having a lot of these stimulus checks go through and things like that. And I think it comes dangerous at our point. Let me give you an example with the eviction moratorium. So the reason why the Democrats wanted to extend it, like Cori Bush, is that they don't want people to go homeless. And I think, right, it's always bad to have people going homeless. Now, what's the problem with that? If you start giving people that mentality that the eviction moratorium is going to be extended forever, what's the problem? People are not going to go back. They're not going to go have the incentive to go work and pay their bills. It creates this mentality that is not good for the American work ethic. Unemployment also created that, where there's a lot of people who are just, making more through unemployment because unemployment was enhanced because of the pandemic, which, if you think about it, I don't think makes any sense. If you're unemployed one part of the, in you know, one part of in another period in time, right? If you're unemployed 5 years ago, what's even the point if you're unemployed now? Because there's why extend it even more? And I think the other thing that I think is really bad is the inflation that we're seeing. Inflation right now is completely ridiculous, and I mean it's coming to the point where I'm saying, what the hell is going on? I mean, I've noticed that I've gone, for example, to the grocery store, and it's little things that add up, and I think over time this is going to add up a lot, to the point where we see, a lot of the increases and things like that. But I think the biggest thing out of all this, with people being unemployed, the biggest thing is people do not pay taxes. Unless people start getting off of benefits, we start making people actually go out to work out of necessity, because it's needed for the economy to run properly. Because then what's also going to happen? Businesses are going to go down because they don't have employees. All these different things. And then in this way, I mean, we're going to have to pay some price for this. It could be a recession. It could be some insane inflation, which we're likely going to see. I think the way that the job market is right now, with the ridiculous, wages that are going on, and I think a lot of people don't understand this. You can earn $15 an hour for minimum wage job, right? And I'm actually somewhat in favor of minimum wage increase, right? Maybe not to $15, but you're earning $15 an hour. But what ends up happening? Inflation is going to go up even more, because the minimum is always the minimum. There's always ways to climb up, and I don't think a lot of people comprehend that. Okay, economic rant over. Let me see. Let me have a drink. Okay, I kind of fell behind a little bit. Okay, you got Ron DeSantis out. That's really cool. Do you think Democrats will be more progressive by 2040, while Republicans will become more moderate by 2040s? I think that moving forward, I think that we're seeing kind of the periods of polarization right now, and kind of the burst of the political bubble. I think Trump was the burst of the political bubble, where the establishment was in control for so long. And I was thinking, and I have a project going on, right? And I'm gonna go in this, more in depth. I'll let you guys know more information when I have more information, but. In this project, I'm really looking at, and I'm going to discuss what really has caused this whole polarization that we're seeing in our nation. What has really caused the more extreme parts of the parties rather, and truly is the establishment controlling the government for so long. We saw Reagan kind of set that into motion after the end of somewhat hard end of his presidency. That became into Bush, then Clinton, then Bush again, and then we have the Obama. And I think all of that in conjunction really caused damages within the roots of our country. A lot of the globalization that really happened in all administrations, that really caused a lot of pain for America. And that rising that we're having now, which progressive Democrats and progressive or not progressive, you know what I mean, populist Republicans, they're coming up and they're going through and creating a new vision for these parties. Again, there's going to be a point in a period where these political bubbles burst, and we're going to see that happen. I'm going to be explaining this more. I'm in the process right now of writing a book. I might have that coming out. That's something I think is happening. So I think something that's interesting. Since 2024 is still 3.5 years away from now, it will be really hard to answer this question. But if you had to guess, what do you think Biden's approval ratings will be by 2024? I think that Biden's approval ratings will likely hover around probably 45, 46, 47%. I think that they're very high right now, but I think by the time we get there, with the way that Congress is slated to go, all these are things, I think his approval rating will fall down 3 to 4 points, which I don't think is ridiculous. By 2024, I bet DeSantis will be more popular than Trump. I think this could be a fact. I think that, for DeSantis, it's going to be a lot easier. Trump has more baggage, and Trump is just fading into obscurity. I think it's something we have to analyze. Since he's been taken off of social media by, big media, what's happened? He's faded into obscurity. And what do you need to win nominations? What do you need to win elections? You need to be out there. So I think it's something that's very important. Ronald Reagan is overrated, in my opinion. He did great things. I really liked his economic view of the country. But yeah, at the end of his presidency, he had a pretty rough time. Do you think DeSantis will pick Dan Crenshaw? Of course not. I think he's gonna have to pick a woman just for identity politics reasons. Is Trumpism and populism or establishing conservatism the best path for the GOP? I think truly the best path for them is going to be populism. I think as long as they can de-associate themselves from Trump and still have the populist brand, that's really what's going to win them races with a lot of these more independent voters. Populist ideas are popular, but Trump isn't. Take the Trump brand out of it, you have a very big base of Republicans and independents. Okay, I think I answered this. Okay, let's see. Do I think that AOC will run in 2028? I don't think so. I think she's going to be busy in the House, with her squad and things like that, building up the progressive environment. I think that an AOC presidential run is probably a couple, I would say 2 or 3 decades away. Or no, maybe 1 or 2 decades away. But I would say she will probably run in her 50s. What's next for AOC? I think she's going to stay in-house and try to climb leadership eventually when a lot of these old people start getting out. I don't think she's running for governor. I don't think she's going to run for Senate, at least now. I think she might run for Senate when Chuck Schumer does retire. And I really doubt she can win that primary, though. Okay, I don't know what you meant. Okay. Well, DeSantis' education at top universities like Harvard and Yale gave him an edge. Trump didn't have that. Trump did have that. Trump graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League university. So, I guess that UPenn is one of the less known, although it's a really good going to actually go there. That Harvard and Yale are just more popular and they're more well known. That might help with some educated voters, but I think it might not really do much because at this point you could graduate from Harvard Law School if you want. But if you're conservative, you're not going to appeal to the Democrats that you study with, right? Let's see. AOC should run until 2048. That's a possibility. Do you think the new voting law in Georgia will affect the state in 2024? The voting laws are not going to do absolutely anything. I think the Democrats in Texas and the Democrats in Georgia, they're throwing a fit about these voting laws. They're ridiculous. They're not going to have a big impact. It's, certain changes, and I think that some of them are based in election security. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that you have to show ID to go somewhere if you're in some of these Democratic states. If you want to go out to a restaurant, you have to show your identification, your vaccine card. But what's the big deal with showing a piece of identification when you go to vote? I think it's ridiculous. I don't think it's going to have a real impact. It's just the Democrats trying to make noise and gain support. It's one of those things. It's like one of those fake issues that we've seen both parties do in the past, where they make a big fit about something. Like the Republicans right now, they're throwing this huge fit when it comes to cancel culture, exaggerating, I would say, to certain points, and just to gain donors. So, in certain ways, I do think that some Republicans, everyone does this. It's just politics. Does John Ossoff have a chance to become president in the future? Absolutely. I think John Ossoff is actually one of the stronger candidates the Democrats can run in the future. Which party do I think will control the House and Senate in 2022? I think that as of right now, I think that the House will be ran by the Republicans. And I think the Senate's going to be close. I think the Democrats have the possibility of keeping it. However, I do think that there's a huge possibility that the Republicans take back the control very nearly. I'm expecting 2022 to be somewhat of a red wave. So I think it's something that could be interesting. Let's see. Who is my favorite president? Yours is James Polk because he did so much. My favorite president, I think that in my eyes, one that had a very interesting, administration was certainly, it was a short-lived administration, but Gerald Ford had, administration-wise, very interesting period in American history, and I think he had an interesting administration. But I will have to say that my favorite president, I would likely end up saying George Washington just because of how much he did for the country. I think that he established the country's democratic instincts, moving forward. Is there any chance that Dems run away from Harris by 2024 and nominate Buttigieg or somewhere else? There's a possibility, and I think that would be such a smarter move. If, these Democratic consultants are smart, they're going to tell the Democrats, the same group of people that made sure that Nina Turner wasn't elected, to say, back someone else. Do not back Kamala Harris. And I think that Pete Buttigieg could be that person. Let's see. Next question. Does Ron Johnson win re-election in Wisconsin? I do think Ron Johnson wins re-election in Wisconsin. I think a lot of people are underestimating him and the Republican Party. I do think that Ron Johnson wins because of the incumbency party. I think that is something that is really going to help them out. Do you think there should be in America where an American minimum wage? And why do you think we should go back on the gold standard? Or do I think we should go back to the gold standard? Okay, the gold standard is actually something that's pretty good to keep track. They make sure that you're not widely spending money. I think it's something that's good. But we're living in a world where gold is not as valuable as it was before. It's valuable and it's still one of the things to back up money, but it's not the same thing it was before. I do think that minimum wages should be controlled. And I don't know, there's people that make throw a big fit about the minimum wage. And this is what I don't get. Most big companies that have big Walmart and other companies, Amazon, $15 minimum wage. And in some places you don't have it. If you were to make a national minimum wage, what's the problem? In very low cost economies where things are just so cheap, things are going to go through the roof because someone that works at Walmart is making enough money as someone in that same market, right? That is a lot lower cost. The wages, it also impacts that. I think that each state and county should be able to decide their own minimum wage. Will I run for president in 2044? Unfortunately, even though as much I would love to run for president, I can't because I'm not a U.S. born, U.S. citizen. So that's an unfortunate note on my part. If the laws are changed and if somehow there could be a constitutional amendment passed to take off the whole, blood, by blood or soil U.S., election, rule, I would love to run for president. Sorry for your question about partner asked twice. The first one said it's through, and I was trying. Yeah. So just so you guys know, I'm a little bit on a delay. So right now it's 8:38. I'm on a comment from 8:31 since I'm going through since I got off track with the last one comments. Let's see. If I ran for president, what state would I try my hardest to win? I would say that if I ran for president, I think that my appeal is going to do very well in the Sun Belt. I would have to put most of my efforts up in the Midwest to probably win the map. I do think that I'm not sure what I would run, and if I ran as independent, I have to focus on a lot of key states to win. 2032 prediction: Maria Elvira Salazar versus John Ossoff. I think that Maria Elvira Salazar is going to be a little bit older, come 2032. And if she does run, I think that against John Ossoff, I think she could end up winning. She's very popular. John Ossoff is popular too, but I think she's more popular. You think the new voting laws will help the GOP for two reasons. They make GOP voters more enthusiastic, and Republicans will trust the process more. Right, and I think that that's another thing. Enthusiasm is going to be very important moving on. And I think it's something the GOP right now is, they're doing a good job. I think that in many ways, a lot of Biden voters have gone back to brunch. And I think it's going to be a very bad thing for them. Because if these voters are back to brunch when it comes to the midterms, guess what? The midterms are going to be lost. Will the United States ever have a dictator? No. The United States system of government is just so bureaucratic to the point where it has so many safeguards in place to stop a dictator. Should Maria Elvira Salazar run for governor? I do think she would run for governor. I think she could win I think she could actually win Miami-Dade. I think that that's how strong of a candidate she is. I think if she certainly does run for governor, she is going to win. Lisa Murkowski, will she win the primary? Yes, I do think Lisa Murkowski will win the primary, just for the main reason Donald Trump doesn't have as big of an influence in Alaska as he does in other states, like in the South, for example. I think that, it's a little different. If you take a look at a race like Arkansas governor, where for the primary in the Republican Party, his endorsement's going to have a lot of weight. Somewhere like in Alaska, I don't think it's going to have the same weight. And Lisa Murkowski is just so popular. I would like to live in a parliamentary democracy where there's a party coalitions under a primary, so like Canada, Spain, and Portugal. I think that's interesting, but then I think that one of the things that would scare me most is that, the different departments of the government wouldn't really be run by experts, by professionals who know everything about the field. It would be some random member of parliament who happens to know about education. Let's see. Could Mike Garcia win New Mexico against AOC? I mean, I think it would be an interesting matchup. I think that based on appeal, based on that, I think maybe that's a marginal maybe. I'm not 100% sure. What do you say Alaska is trending red, blue, or neither? I think it's definitely trending blue. I think mostly it's because of the whole Trump brand in Alaska. That the Republican Party in general has been moving further to the right. And I think Alaska voters are moderate to liberal Republicans. That's my characterization. Let's see. When will the United States collapse? I would say the United States is not going to collapse. I think the current system of government that we're seeing across the world pretty much has created a way where big political changes in countries is going to be very difficult. I think technology has caused that politically stability is super strong now. I think the United States will never actually collapse. Do I think Larry Elder will be the governor of California? I think that's a maybe. I think that the biggest thing in this scenario is definitely going to be, does Gavin Newsom get recalled? And I think at this point, that's another maybe. I do think that Gavin Newsom has a possibility of getting recalled. I think the Republicans' enthusiasm is going to be through the roof. And if all the Republicans go out to vote and independents turn out massively against the recall, or actually for the recall, my bad, I think we're going to be seeing Newsom get recalled, and Larry Elder will probably be the likely victory. So where am I from? So I am from Florida. I live in Florida, but I was born in Venezuela. When do you think California will flip red, and what do you think Texas will flip blue? I don't think California will flip red. It has to be something very specific where you have a horrible candidate running against like some really popular Republican. And Texas going blue, I think it could be somewhere around 2032, 2036, 2040 possibly. Would we have ever had our first Hispanic president by 2050? We could have a Hispanic president by 2050. I think that's a possibility. Now, I think that that's one of Hispanics are becoming clearly one of they're the largest minority in the United States. Yet their representation in Congress isn't as big, and especially politically they haven't had much representation in the past. So I do think that moving forward, there's probably going to be more, Hispanics in office. The U.S. could be center left by 2050, certainly, but who knows what could end up happening. Which and how many moderate conservatives will be primaried in 2020? Literally, I think every moderate conservatives are going to be primaried in 2022. Trump is going to do his best to try to have his influence in the party, and he's going to have big candidates to make sure they run. And I think ultimately it's something that we can't ask ourselves but we know what's going to happen. Trump has done it, and he will continue to it because he wants to assert dominance in the Republican Party. Could a president be assassinated in today's time? I mean, I think that's the sad answer is yes. I mean, you really do not know what could end up happening. And sometimes the president lets down the guard, and who knows, possibly by luck, there's secret agents everywhere. But who knows if there is that possibility. Will New Mexico go red by the next 50 years? Yeah, I think that has the possibility of certain candidates. Is Ron DeSantis the only Republican who can beat Joe Biden in 2024? I think that the 2024 election, when it comes to Joe Biden, there's going to be a lot of different factors. I think, no, there's other Republicans out there. I just think it's more of the fact that Joe he's going to be a little bit more frail. He's going to have some challenges from his presidency. So I think, it's going to be the biggest thing for him. When will moderate Democrats, when they will be primaried? I think when the, very further left movement gain support in the suburbs, when they start getting donors, when they start building the grassroots effort and to the masses, to the point that something like that will happen. Big money needs to be there. Can Nikki Haley beat Joe Biden or Kamala Harris in 2024? I think she can beat Kamala Harris. I do not think she can beat Joe Biden. I don't think the excitement would be behind her. She's a neoconservative, so amongst the more Trumpy side of the party, I wouldn't be surprised if they get they don't vote for her. But I do think that if it comes down to it, maybe a lot of those voters are going to put their differences aside and they're going to come out for her, and I think she wins independence. If I had to pick an ideology, would you pick fascism or communism? So these two ideologies are completely two different because they're not on the same scale. So I'm not going to answer the question, but I would clearly pick capitalism, and I would certainly not pick fascism. So no. Did I expect Andrew Cuomo to resign? Absolutely not. I thought Andrew Cuomo was going to be selfish. I thought he was going to be, the same Andrew Cuomo, that he's been for the last couple of months, actually, when he's had these allegations of sexual assault, nursing home, and he just brushed it under the rug and he said, oh, who cares? I thought that was the thing he was going to do. And I was surprised to the point where he really did not do that. So I think it's something that's interesting. I fish follow Canadian politics. I actually do follow Canadian politics to a certain extent. I watch JJ McConnell. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but his videos are amazing. I that's how I kind of got into Canadian politics. I discuss Canadian politics with my friends, but I don't do YouTube videos about it because one, it's a pretty different system, and it would be kind of hard to make those videos. When it comes to Canadian politics, I think it's interesting, the whole parliamentary system, fringe parties that are rising, the minority governments. It's fun, it's insane, and it's crazy, which it's pretty fun politically. Would I agree that most to all of the moderate Republicans are in the Northeast and Alaska? 100% agreed. This is what Andrew Cuomo said. I'm not perverted. I'm just Italian. So, yeah, I mean, he tried to brush this off a million times. He tried a million different excuses. And something else I want to talk about the Andrew Cuomo situation. I want to see what you guys think. I do think that Chris Cuomo, his brother, should be let off of his duties from CNN. I don't think it would be proper journalism, and I don't think it's proper for Chris Cuomo to still be in CNN, just based on what we know that he was trying to be very influential with his brother, not covering the situation. It was the biggest story in the country. So tell me what you guys think about that. Hey, Robert Washington, how are you? If I'm comfortable answering this, where do you stand on the political spectrum? So I would say that, for example, socially, I'm a little bit more moderate. Economically, I'm more center right. And then for other issues, I generally fall in the center part of the spectrum. I would identify myself with someone like maybe like Mitt Romney, with someone like Kirsten Sinema. I would say the person that I identify the most with is probably Kirsten Sinema. So not really that much Mitt Romney, but more someone like Kirsten Sinema with a little bit more further right economic views. If Cuomo won the nomination and the president in 2022, would he resign or be impeached? I think he would have to be impeached. I think that when you're president of the United States, you're going to have to build a big amount of courage to resign. And even if you were like bombarded by your aides, bombarded by everyone else to actually resign, it's very hard. And I think he wouldn't have done it. Let's see. Are neoconservatives pretty much extinct? I think to a certain extent, yes. If Trump runs in 2024, will he choose Mike Pence again as his running mate, or who else will he choose? I think he's not going to choose Mike Pence. He's probably going to end up choosing Tim Scott or probably someone like Kirsten Noem. But I think Tim Scott's going to be the easiest way. Tim Scott is actually becoming, I think, one of the people a lot of people should be looking at. I think Tim Scott could be one of the people that could actually pull off an upset primary victory in 2024. He is just insanely popular with donors. He is someone they could actually, I think, do well with. Libertarianism or socialism? Libertarianism, 100%. I am someone who is scared of socialism. I fled socialism when I moved here from Venezuela. And I think that truly the socialist message sounds beautiful. Like I was trying to tell you guys yesterday. With what we saw with Cori Bush and the eviction moratorium, where she's saying we don't want to leave Americans without homes. And I agree with that, but then you also have to remember there's people that's whole like livelihoods depend on getting the rent paid because they're landlords. You know what I mean? I think that people underestimate that, and I think the economy and the economic freedom of the United States is something that's way more important, to the point, and there's jobs out there. It's not that people in this country can go out to work and produce and live a good life. People in Venezuela, for example, they could go out to work, but their wages are not worth nothing. People in the United States actually earn a fair, livable wage. And like with that, I think a lot of people then say, well, people can't live off a minimum wage. Well, right. And I think to a certain extent, you're not always going to be, in those minimum wage jobs. You're going to have to somehow work yourself up the ladder. You should be living in Europe. It would be my best match. I think if I had to pick a European country to live in, and I think I would fall in pretty much anywhere politically, probably somewhere between the UK or France. Let's see. Am I more Republican or Democrat? So I think that this question, I'm a little bit more Republican because of the state I live in and the politicians that I give in, that I kind of interact with on a regular basis, that I see a lot more, I kind of follow more. Just because the Florida Democratic Party is in complete disarray. They've done a bunch of messes when it comes to one of my big issues as a voter is South America and that foreign policy, along domestic issues. But that's one of the things that kind of tie the different knots together, because I can kind of tell with how a lot of the parties stand with South America and a lot of the governments, and how strong, tough they're on a lot of those, socialist governments, where I think they're going to take the country. And I think that from what I've seen, the Republican Party has been more active at that. Let's see. Social democracy is not center left, not far. But look, I think it's very simple. In present day, a social democracy can only be achieved when you have just very high taxes outright, not by the way that the Democratic Party wants to do it, where it's just spend, and get nothing taxed. So I think that social democracy is pretty much impossible. There's a very small, time frame you have to hit exactly on that to achieve it. And if you can, I mean, props to you. But at this point, the only form of socialism, in my eyes, is the far left socialism we see in Latin America. U.S. sanctions and oil crash hurt Venezuela. Of course, and I think that moving forward, I think that the U.S. sanctions are hurting Venezuela in many stances. And I think that sanctions to a certain extent need to be lifted, because then in that way you could have some sort of investment in the country, so the country is just rot. But I think the people who are in power are just complete bozos who just destroy the country, and all they do is steal money. If Joe Biden survived, would he have been president? I think definitely. And if Joe Biden survived as well, we would have seen a very interesting 2016 primary between Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders. Do I think Joe Biden will run for a second term? I don't think so. Will Minnesota be a swing state? Maybe. I'm not 100% sure. That's a marginal maybe. Let's see. The European country you would like to live with is in Portugal or Sweden. Interesting. After what political playground said about Minnesota? I thought of asking this question. When did Minnesota? Do I think Minnesota could flip red? I think Minnesota could flip red when the Republicans have the right candidate. Will the progressive wing ever take over the Democratic Party? I think there's going to be that period. I think 20 to 30 years when you start, and even I think earlier, I think 10 to 15 years when you start seeing a lot of the present leadership leave Congress, or a lot. And I think a lot of things that we're seeing with a lot of the Democrats in leadership is they're not retiring; they're just dying in their seats. So, after the big wave of those people leaving office, we're going to see that side of the party take over. I would have voted for FDR. Let's see. Well, Trump would run against Harris or someone. So I don't know what you get by that. You would love the commercial hit or misses by roll call. They're freaking hilarious. I know. I love watching it every week. Every time they come out, I'm laughing because they're hilarious. If you guys don't watch the congressional hit or misses, they're the most ridiculous compilations of senators being goofy, saying dumb stuff, some mistakes. I remember with the insurrection, there was really funny jokes with that. I mean, not about the whole event, but the speeches the senator said they made mistakes and stuff. And they have each year the best of the year. Look at those so you can have a good laugh about Congress. Is Trump a modern day Nixon? I don't think he's a modern day Nixon, because Nixon is completely different. He had completely different political views. The only thing that Nixon did wrong was, which is pretty big, I guess, is the going into the Watergate scandal. And I think Trump, by no means anything he's done is Watergate related or close to Watergate. So no, he's not modern day Nixon. Will Mitt Romney win re-election in 2024? Easily. Utah is a very moderate conservative state. And I think that Mitt Romney is the type of person to win there. We will see neither of those. No, the Democrats will be socialists, and even worse, I don't think the GOP will ever be fascist. I think, again, these crazy, ridiculous people say the GOP is fascist and the Democrats are complete socialists is dangerous to our country because you're generalizing and it's creating very bad things for the country. I think the whole thing about young people being more progressive does not mean anything in the future. Remember, the baby boomers are far left hippies, and now they're very conservative. I 100% agree. People grow, people develop, and millennials. I think if you take a look at data, they're trending a little bit more towards the right. And even amongst younger generations, Gen Z voters, they're not trending out as far for the Democrats as I would say the millennials did when they were young. Congress people are people too, and sometimes it's ridiculous. Let's see. Without the Watergate scandal, would Nixon go down? No, of course not. I don't think he's in that tier yet, but he wouldn't be, as far down as he is. People were saying in the 1960s the revolution was unstoppable. Guess what? It got stopped. How do you think Trump will be looked at far in the future? I think that far in the future, I think that mostly what Trump is going to get associated with was going to be the last days of his presidency. And I think with just the way that education in the U.S. currently is, it's going to be a very anti-Trump sentiment. Although, people can make the argument that Trump was not as bad as people think. And I think a lot of people, like, let me give you the example of Barack Obama. A lot of people think that Barack Obama was one of the worst presidents in U.S. history, and I disagree with that. In the same way that I disagree that Trump is a bad president either. Both of these people were, I think, pretty good presidents in what they did for the country. It's just that in the heat of the political moment, people are going to be 100% pissed at what they did. How do you think Republicans could win Texas, when go blue, or do you think the country will be this place where Democrats always win? I don't think Texas will be. I think that the country could have been a place where Democrats always win if Donald Trump got another term in the White House. And I think for the Democrats, them winning the White House was the dumbest move ever because they pretty much lost the congressional, majority they could have had. Trump could have driven the Republican Party into a train wreck, not necessarily himself, but the way the media was going to cover him. And I think that was going to be the ticket to the Democrats having control forever. Let's see. We're seeing more people further to the left and right due to climate change and other 21st century problems. Culture wars. All of this is a culture war. We're living in the big American culture war that we're really seeing right now. People don't realize it, but that's simply what it is. There's the climate change argument. There's a lot of things that are ultimately, I wouldn't say 100% important and, important to the U.S. life. I think that climate change is something that we should think about, but it's not going to be 100% decisive into, our livelihood as a U.S. country. Similarly, and very ironically, and actually, I'm wearing a climate change shirt, but that's besides the point. But there's other issues that I think that, there's like culture war, the critical race theory issues. All of these are culture things, and I think ultimately that's going to be the big 21st century movement. You heard the infrastructure bill was passed. If it didn't pass and it went further into passing, is that if it didn't pass, then it went for. I don't get what you mean there, but the infrastructure bill is a big thing for the Democrats right now. That's one of the big things they could say in 2022 they did. People probably not going to care at all. Would you vote for an alternate election, Grover Cleaner or Donald Trump? Donald Trump, 100%. If the Kabul riot happened before the 2020 elections, then how would it affect the 2020 election? I think that it would have affected Trump. If the same effects social media taken down, all of that, it would have affected Trump 100%. Now, I think that it's one of the things that I think really hurt the Democrats was BLM riots. I think that in a way, at the end of the election, as crazy as this may sound, Black Lives Matter really ended up helping Trump almost narrowly win. It's in places like Wisconsin, places like Pennsylvania, that BLM almost gave Trump a victory. So I think that was pretty interesting. Trump would defeat Harris, but I think he would narrowly lose to Biden. I agree with that. If you take a look at all my predictions, you would pretty much see that. Would you be willing to do a video entirely about climate change? I know it's a bit out of your field, but I'm curious to hear your viewpoint. I think that the thing with climate change is just that it's something that I think scientists over-exaggerate, but in my eyes, like climate change shouldn't be the government's number one issues. We have millions of other issues, and I think climate change is important, but it's something that just happens with the earth, by itself, right? So I think that people should really not think about that. So that's what I think. Would have Gore been a good president? I do think that Al Gore would have been a good president. I think that in many ways it really kind of it was taken out of his hands a little bit because of the electoral system. But you can say what you can say. But yeah, pretty much. So, guys, it's 9:01 p.m. on the East Coast. And before I leave, though, I did want to mention that my flags are no longer up. So, as I told you guys, I'm just sending my studio. That's gonna be a couple months out. Something actually really excited for. But as for right now, I'm actually what you guys don't see behind the scenes. Like I film in my room, and I have this big wall where I put the flags up, and I painted this because I'm gonna rearrange where my room goes and stuff. For now, I'm going to leave this as my background for live streams and things like that while I build the studio down in my parents' garage. All great things start in your parents' garage. So yeah, I'm gonna have all of that ready for you guys. Probably by the midterms, I'm gonna have that for you guys. But yeah. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching today. If you enjoyed the live stream and you're not yet subscribed, first of all, what are you doing? But if you're not subscribed, please give it a huge thumbs up and subscribe because I think it's something that could be great. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really enjoyed the company of a lot of people here today. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and good.